Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. And by the way, not to get everyone, disappointed, but this week is the last episode of 2024. Maybe that makes you excited. Maybe that makes you disappointed. I hope if you've been unable to listen to some episodes, that means that you now have a few weeks to catch up and listen to some episodes that have come out recently that maybe you weren't able to dive into. If you've been here a while, you know that I generally take the last couple of weeks of the year off, and I'm elongating it just a bit because now I'm a mom and I need a little bit more time than just like 2 weeks. So without, doing anything actively for the podcast, even though I am still kind of recording for 2025, but nevertheless, this is the last episode of 2024. Break out the tiny violin, which doesn't exist post-editing, I don't think, but just imagine it in your minds. And the good news is, however, that the podcast will be back the second week of January. And if I quickly look at my calendar here, that makes January 7th the week that the podcast will be back, which is very, very exciting. So just mark your calendars. You get the first few days of January off. And actually, I will be taking a much needed respite trip. Hopefully everything works out. So that'll be really nice that I can actually unplug and literally unplug before returning to work and returning to the podcast on January 7th. So, of course, I'm going to wrap up our episodes for this year with, kind of like a summary of what's to come in 2025. And so I have a number of topics here, or I should say trends, I'll say, that I think are going to be super prevalent in 2025. I'm not going to go into them too deeply. And I should have started this episode by saying that I have a cold. And so if I sound congested, it's because I am, and I'm really sorry. But nevertheless, I'm going to spend time talking about all of these trends that I'm predicting will continue to be prevalent if they're not already, or if they are already, or if they're not prevalent already, that they will become prevalent in 2025. So before jumping into that, I just want to start off by saying, well, I've already started off, but you get what I'm saying. I want to continue by saying thank you, because this is the 4th year of the podcast. And this episode specifically is episode number 208. And I really, truly could not have 208 episodes without you, without my assistant, without my editor. I mean, I'm just so, so grateful to all of the listeners and all of the people in the background who help me make this podcast what it is. So thank you, and thank you once again. Without further ado, let's jump into the trends for 2025. Drumroll, please. The first is that human-centric leadership will continue to evolve. 90% of HR leaders believe human-centric leadership is crucial for success. And the key here is that we're going to see a shift in moving from command and control to empathy-driven leadership, which we kind of have already seen, right? Like we've talked a lot about this over the last 12 months, so to speak, even though technically my podcast was on maternity leave with me, but you get what I'm saying, the last calendar year. The second trend that we really need to see, and we've talked about this before, is the balance between AI and the human. And again, as you know, there have been a number of episodes where I've highlighted either on my own or with a guest the importance of seeing AI as a tool rather than a takeover. And the theme here is that AI is an enhancement. It's a tool. It's a resource. It's not intended to replace what humans do. Maybe in some areas, we're going to see AI replace people. Like, for example, if, I don't know, if we think about like an Amazon store front, like there are no people in that store, in those stores, and it's just like the computers and the technology and AI that run that store logistically. So maybe we will see AI as a replacement there, but generally speaking, the trend or the focus for 2025 here is that we need to strike a balance between technology and AI technology and human interference or interaction or involvement. AI should be for routine tasks, while humans should be focused on strategic thinking. And there also needs to be literacy surrounding AI across all organizations. When we think about not only how people use AI, but also the security that concerns that could come into question with improper use or setup of AI technology, it's really important that there's a focus on literacy and regulation around AI. And also, there is an emphasis that we need to place on ethical and responsible use for AI. For example, companies that deal with confidential information should make sure that their employees are not entering confidential information into AI tools unless there's some proprietary technology that enables them to do so. But, for example, if you're using ChatGPT, you might not want to put your social security number in there. Just gonna go out on a limb and say that. But this is just a very specific example. But if you're dealing with like customer data or financial data, there has to be an awareness and understanding of what responsible use looks like. Our role as HR practitioners is to support the transition and the collaboration between AI technology and human interaction. Also, we have to reduce fear and build confidence around this, because there's nothing to be afraid of. If you are afraid that AI is going to take over your job, you are not focused on the right things. Focus on what you can control. AI is here to stay. Technology is here to stay. No one is complaining about having a cell phone, right? But 30 years ago or so, when cell phones first hit the scene, I'm trying to think of like the very first handheld cell phone that maybe that was in the 80s or 90s. Anyway, I digress. Like, people might have had some fear around it, but at the end of the day, like, it's technology and it's allowed us to move society forward in many ways. So we have to reduce that sense of fear and help to build confidence around what a collaborative, balanced approach to technology combined with human interaction, what that looks like. I think I did an episode on AI and job replacement and stuff like that. There are ways that you can hopefully future proof your jobs. And, especially in HR, we deal with a lot of people and we deal with things that are nuanced, that are probably a little bit more complex than just something that an algorithm can solve for. And so, those are things that you have to think about in terms of like where you're spending your time. Let technology and AI help you with mundane things so that you can spend the bulk of your time on things that are more strategic and more impactful on your organization. And then finally, in this, balance between AI and human interaction, consider upskilling programs. Like, when we think about how we build confidence, we do have to help people see where they can invest in themselves or be invested in by their companies in order for their skills to be fine-tuned and made more strong, so that they can hopefully, again, future-proof their careers. Another trend here, in reading through my notes, let me see which one. I think, there's some trends here that I think we've kind of covered, but, I'm going to read it anyway. Personalization of work experience and, moving away from these outdated workplace trends. At first I was like, should I even talk about this? Because we've talked about it a lot. But, at the end of the day, I think it's probably still going to be a trend, because there are still so many outdated workplace instances there, like rigid schedules, one size fits all approaches, performance metrics that are like, antiquated. And we had to move forward. And like the company that I work for is in workforce management. And we talk a lot about this with scheduling and automation, and turning hourly jobs into good jobs is our mission. And so when we think about moving forward in this trend, there has to be customization and personalization around working hours, schedules, development and individual development plans and paths. Um, how we evaluate performance. And of course, that is kind of like always something that we're talking about in HR. But, a lot of this is really like thinking about the individual, which I think is something that will probably always and hopefully always be a trend. Another trend here, something again that we talk a lot about, is employee well-being and engagement. And you know what? Again, I think this will continue to be a trend until workplaces get it right. And the reality is that there's always going to be a workplace out there that isn't getting it right. The challenge here is addressing this term, the great detachment, where people are basically not creating that sense of belonging within their organizations for themselves. Like they just do not attach to their organizations. They detach, dissociate, and are not like super committed and invested. And so some focus areas to improve that are around focusing on mental health opportunities or options for people in terms of benefits outside of the traditional employee assistance program or EAP, integrating the work and personal life rather than just striking a balance. We heard from Megan Grace last week on Gen Z and what they want in the workplace. And this kind of continues in this same focus area, that there has to be this harmony and integration between our work and personal lives, because there isn't a separation as much as there used to be, at least. And then meaningful, fulfilling work and purposeful work has to continue to be the focus. If someone is not feeling fulfilled in their work, that's going to very significantly impact not only their happiness, but their well-being, their engagement, and their success and achievement at work and in the workplace. So some strategies here are to focus on two-way communication, really having discussions with people, and not just telling people, but really offering up the opportunity to have conversations, rebuilding or having a renaissance on the culture of the organization. There are some things that I'm doing in my role now that are certainly with the effort not only to refocus, but maybe in some ways to rebuild and have a renaissance on our culture. And even if it's redundant for some people, it's really meaningful because culture is so impactful on people's experiences at work. And then finally, I know you've probably heard me say it a million times, especially if you've been here since the beginning, but I always like to say we bring our whole selves to work. So in that same breath, we have to focus on the whole person when we are developing them, when we're, helping them to move forward in their careers. The entire person has to be part of that, rather than Traci at work versus Traci at home. We are developing Traci, or we are developing Susie salesperson, right? So bringing that whole self to work and developing that whole self at work. 3 more trends for you all to think about and digest here. Skills and development evolution is one of them. We've already kind of touched on this topic of upskilling, but here's a statistic for you. 6 in 10 employees will need skill-based training by 2027. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if that statistic was low, because if you think about the number of layoffs, the number of organizational changes, the number of people who have gone without training to begin with in the last, 4 or 5 years, I think it goes without saying that there are a lot of people working today, or who will be working, who have not had any kind of skills-based training at all. And you know what? If that's the statistic, let's just get everybody upskilled. Let's get everyone trained on the things that they need within their roles or within their careers, professions, whatever. And let's get them to be as close to 100% as possible. Some shifts that I think we'll see, or that there will be a shift from tenure-based to skills-based evaluations. So, we've seen a lot of companies, unfortunately, lay off very tenured or senior members of their teams. So skills are going to be very, very, very important. Transferable skills as well as skills that are acquired over time. I mean, these things are super important. Continuous learning will need to become essential. If we know that 6 in 10 employees will need this skill-based training in the next basically 2 years, then we know that learning has to be a part of the framework and the fabric of an organization. And by the way, hopefully this goes without saying, skills are both technical and the power skills, as my friend Erin Deal likes to say, and rather than soft skills. And those skills, the technical and the power, are really important, because when working in tandem, you have some magic that's happening there. And when we think about how we make all of this happen, we have to look at some learning platforms. Probably we need to think about how we teach adaptability and agility so that people can kind of move and ebb and flow with the change in approach to skills and training and learning and things like that. And there will have to just continue to be development of obtaining new skills, transferring skills across departments, across careers. Like, things are not stagnant anymore. They're not static either. I would say organizations require a lot of agility from people. And I think the people who are able to be the most agile and the most adaptable are the ones who tend to continue to kind of, shed their skin and find new ways to remain really important to organizations. So something we'll probably continue to see. And the second to last trend here is that businesses will hopefully focus on sustainability and being eco-conscious. And so some emerging trends that we see around, or that we're seeing around this, are a boom, I should say, in green jobs, a focus on the environmental elements and stewardship, of these types of jobs, and then very conscious best practices within businesses. And I would imagine that remote work continues to emphasize this sustainability. I think many companies continue to offer remote or hybrid work options for some of these reasons, which is great to see. And, certainly from a human element of things, people will have to continue to align their work with personal values. And we've talked about it before, that when people are working in organizations where they feel alignment on their values, there is a huge awakening for a person, and a sense of really like belonging and community for that person, because there's a values alignment and a values match there, which will continue to be really important. Also, companies, especially those within these emerging trends, will and should create purpose-driven roles and build sustainable careers. The things are always changing. I mean, even when we think about 10 years ago, like what the way that social media wasn't necessarily like a business. And now you have like thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people who are content creators and influencers. I mean, when we think about sustainability, my question for them is, how do you future-proof your jobs? Because that job is a product of this massive, progressive innovation that didn't exist before. Like content creation in this way, like with social media and like buying and selling on an app. These are all like super, super new innovations. And while they probably are here to stay, at least for a significant period of time, just like anything else, there's the potential for it not to be sustainable. Like, I always bring it back to Blockbuster. Blockbuster probably thought that they had it made for eternity. And then here comes Netflix jumping on the scene, right? So how do these people in these jobs, even for ourselves, we might not be content creators or, on social media, and we still have this call to action to focus on the sustainability in our careers. How do we future proof our careers from emerging technologies that could otherwise really challenge the landscape for us? Now, we talk about this a little bit in AI, and I would imagine that with the right responsibilities and regulations applied within organizations, that there won't be this replacement effect, as we've talked about before. But there's a really big emphasis, I think, and we'll see this, I believe, in 2025 on the sustainability. And I think one of the best things that people can do is acquire transferable skills, diversify themselves, do what you can to invest in yourself and your learning and your growing. All of those things are investments. Like, you're never going to waste time when you're focusing on upskilling your own skills, right? You're never going to waste your time if you're finding ways to invest in yourself. So do more of that. And then the last, I think, key trend for 2025 is on workplace connection. And I talked about it in an episode, I think that's coming out in 2025. I don't think it came out yet, but yeah, I think it's coming out in toward the end of January, but it's about connection and connectivity at work. So you'll hear more about this already in one of the first episodes of the new year from me. So this is a last but not least trend for 2025. Like, this is going to continue to be very, very important. You know, we'll continue to see hybrid work evolve. We'll also continue to see remote work evolve. People are not giving up on the remote life. People are also not giving up on the hybrid life. I think that the hybrid work methodology is probably what's going to end up being the reigning champion for most companies, because it kind of is where this balance is struck between business needs and employee demands. At the same time, I think remote work, I don't think they're going to be so far away from one another. I think hybrid and remote are going to be like top two, and then full in office is going to be last in the top three. Um, I know very few people who want to be in the office full time. And I think that's for a very good reason, because people want flexibility and they want to have more time in their busy weeks. And in-person work, doesn't really offer that compared to remote or hybrid work. So we'll continue to see more on that. However, what we do plan to see, and Megan mentioned this a little bit last week also, that people want and they do value very deeply in-person connection. And we talked about this with regard to Gen Z last week, because it's kind of like you want to have the remote work flexibility, and you also want to have the opportunity and the option of meeting in person. And so we'll probably continue to see that. And then, of course, because of these demands and the way that connectivity and connection in general have changed and will continue to evolve, we'll probably see new technologies that are more immersive, that drive this, very unique type of connection, and hopefully foster more collaboration as well. But it would be really interesting to see what technologies come out of this very significant demand and push from both employees and employers. Culturally speaking, we know it's very difficult to build community across time zones and geographies and countries. And so that will continue to be a major topic in 2025, while also maintaining a human connection in this digital age. I think I might have mentioned that it seems like the pendulum is swinging a little bit. It was like fully swung into being 100% digital and social in the last like 20 years. And now it's kind of like, well, maybe not even the last 20, maybe in the last like 10 or 15. And then now it's kind of like, well, we want less of that actually. And we want a little bit more of that in-person connection. So it'll be interesting to see that as well. And then, of course, hopefully this goes without saying, but all of this requires inclusive environments, and that the places and the environments in which people are working foster inclusivity and belonging and diversity and equity, because all of those things matter. And so with that, the common thread here across all of these sources, which by the way, all of these articles where I kind of pulled these 2025 trends from, looking ahead, all of these links will be in the show notes. But the common thread here, the invisible string, if you will, is the need to balance both the technological advancement with the human connection. And I believe that successful organizations in 2025 will be those who can leverage new technologies while strengthening human relationships and personal development. The companies that can do that are going to be on top in 2025. So you heard it here first. Those are my predictions, but also these are borrowed from many articles, which again will be linked in the show notes. So I think it probably won't even come as a surprise, any of these to you, because they're, already being talked about. So with that said, I, again, am so grateful that you have been here for another year in its entirety. I can't believe we're already at the end of 2024, but I wish you a very healthy, happy, quiet, relaxing, successful, peaceful, and meaningful holiday season. Like, how many more adjectives can I come up with? But yes, please, I hope it's a wonderful holiday season for everyone. I will, of course, still be reachable on Instagram and LinkedIn and email. So if you want to continue to connect, please feel free. Otherwise, I will see you January 7th, 2025 for the next episode. And in the meantime, catch up on some episodes you haven't listened to. Share this podcast with a friend. Rate 5 stars if you feel so inclined. Leave a review, whatever you can do. I really appreciate it because your dedication to listening to these episodes really matters a lot to me, and I deeply, deeply appreciate it. So without further ado, without taking you on a longer journey than I've already taken you on, I bid you adieu 2024. Thank you for everything, and I will see you in the new year. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.